One of the hallmarks of a Christian and of Christianity in general is gratitude. It's thanksgiving. The Bible is characterized by a sense of thankfulness that you see throughout. And the part of the Bible that we just heard read to us is actually all about that. It's from one of the eyewitness accounts of the life of Jesus, from Luke. And it gives us an account of Jesus healing 10 men with leprosy. He heals all 10, and this is the key detail, only one of them shows gratitude. Only one of them returns to express thanks. And it's a very simple account, but it shows so much about gratitude, which is what we're going to spend our time together thinking about this afternoon. Here's what we'll look at. We're going to look at the problem that we have with gratitude. We're going to look at the power that we can find for gratitude, and then the practice of gratitude. Something about the problem, then we'll look at the power, and then we'll look at the practice of gratitude. Here's the problem. It's very interesting that talk of gratitude is now really common within our culture. The idea of a gratitude practice or a gratitude habit is widely accepted. Across the board, actually, from the medical community, doctors, therapists, then into education, and then into the world of health and well-being. And if you start reading into it, there is an incredible amount of data that confirms so many of the benefits of a regular practice of gratitude. And many of them you might expect they're in the realm that you would think. So they can improve markers of emotional well-being, markers of mental well-being. But there's some more surprising ones too. There's studies come out that show that regular gratitude can improve physical markers of health, stuff like immune function and sleep. Lots of books now, lots of guides, apps on the subject. But here's what's really interesting. As gratitude and the kind of currency of gratitude has risen, you begin to realize something. Gratitude is a huge problem. Gratitude is a massive problem for us. And you see it in the passage. 10 get healing, and only 1 shows gratitude. Now that way around is important. It isn't that 10 get healing, 9 come back in thanksgiving, and only 1 doesn't. The way around is important. It shows us something significant about the way that the world works, which is this. Gratitude does not come naturally. Ingratitude is often our default. As a parent, you find this out very, very quickly. You don't have to teach a child to be ungrateful. Ingratitude comes naturally. I have 4 children, and I don't think I've ever had to say to a single one of my 4 children growing up, please would you stop saying thank you? This is really embarrassing. You're overdoing it. Whereas countless times, what do you say? What do you say? Yeah. Why is that? Well, kids forget, don't? Of course they do. We forget. Of course we do. But that doesn't explain what you see in this passage. I mean, after all, these men have just received a miraculous healing from Jesus. We'll see just how transformative that would have been for them. It's not really the kind of thing that slips your mind. So one of the issues, and one of our problems with gratitude more generally, is that we often focus on the wrong thing. It's easy to fall into the trap of comparison. So look, you have 10 lepers, all of them healed at the same time. 9 of them don't come back. Now, I would imagine that when you're surrounded by another 9 people for whom exactly the same thing has just happened, regardless of how incredible it was, but the exact same thing has just happened, it's easier to be less thankful. It's easier to be less grateful. It's always easier to get your focus fixed on what's around you rather than let gratitude rise within the heart. It's always easier to look at someone else or something else and immediately feel less grateful. Here's what I mean. It's a particular problem in our culture. Gratitude disappears the moment you see another thing. You feel thankful for the simple provision of daily food. But then you walk past that restaurant that's just opened, but you know you can't afford to go to. Or you feel thankful for a healthy body, but then you see a picture of a celebrity with a perfect body. You feel really thankful for your house. Then you remember your friend just moved into a bigger house. We live in such an affluent culture. There are always reasons to feel others have done better, to feel others have got it better, to feel others have got more than us. And it's such a visual culture as well. And to be perfectly honest with you, so many people get constant feeds and alerts simply reminding them of how much better the lives of other people appear to be. But this is not just a cultural problem, you know. I explained some of it. But this is darker and it's deeper. Because what we're beginning to see here is the darkness and the sinful self-centeredness of the human heart. There is an inward curve in every single one of us. It is ultimately sin, the Bible says, that prevents gratitude. How? Let me show you just a few ways. There are so many more. It's interesting, isn't it, that Jesus expects gratitude in the passage. Listen to verse 17. Jesus asks the man who comes back, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Now, why does Jesus expect gratitude? Is this just good manners? Is this Jesus just kind of saying, well, always remember to say please, always remember to say thank you? No, we're getting a glimpse here of a universal spiritual principle. And it's this, that gratitude exists because we live in a world made by God. More, gratitude is owed because we live in a world made by God. The lepers are really just a more focused example of a larger principle. Gratitude is owed because we live in a created world that belongs to God. So listen, it means any good thing you have, anything you've received as a gift. Here is how the brother of Jesus will put it later on in the New Testament in James. James chapter 1, verse 17. He says this, "Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows." Do you hear that? Which good gifts that you have and that I have can we trace back to God? Every good gift descends from him. That there is anything good in the lives of any single one of us is a staggering act of a gracious God. It is an incredible act of lavish generosity. In a world he made, he is the one who gives good gifts. So failure to acknowledge that is a denial. By definition, it's ingratitude. And actually, I wonder if the popularity of gratitude habits, of gratitude practices, is actually a sign. It's the tug of the human heart that still says, you should be grateful. The thing that went well, you should be thankful. That even though obscured by sin, we still want to say thank you to somebody. Can I push this a bit further? We're ultimately ungrateful because we think we deserve more. That's what sin does. That's what sin always does. Let me take you to this profound philosophical text called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Do you remember Veruca Salt? She's the classic spoiled child, and she always gets what she wants. And there is a part where Willy Wonka takes them into the nut room, and in the nut room are the trained squirrels. And Veruca turns to her rich father and she says, "Daddy, I want one." And the father says, "Well, of course you can have one. Of course. We will simply buy one." And Willy Wonka turns to her and says, "Oh, no, they're not for sale. Not these squirrels. These are very, very special squirrels. No one gets to buy these." And so she tries to grab one anyway, and do you remember what happens? Sucked down the rubbish heap. That's what happens to Veruca. She gets sucked into the rubbish tip. And then the Oompa Loompas, they sing one of their songs. They sing this. They sing, "Oompa Loompa, doobity-da. If you're not spoiled, you will go far. You will live in happiness too, like the Oompa Loompas, doobity-doo." Now, why does it work so well? Because it does. Why does it work so well? It's because there's nothing worse than seeing a spoiled child, but it only works. It only looks horrible in someone like Veruca because we recognize a shadow in ourselves too. You know? It's just close enough to the bone that we see the reality in us as well, and it makes us shudder. Sin breeds a sense of entitlement that cuts against the very heart of gratitude itself. That's the problem. So how do you get the power to overcome that? The power to show gratitude? Well, I said I'd come back to this, and in none of it do I want to take away from how awful the life of these 10 men must have been. Being a leper was horrendous. In the ancient world, there were few things that could have happened to somebody that were more tragic than this. It meant death. It meant actual death. Leprosy in the Bible, it can encompass a number of different conditions, but it almost certainly here means a disease that slowly kills you by inches as your body disintegrates. It eats itself. But it also meant death for who you were. It was death for community. It was death for belonging. Whenever a leper was around other people, they had to shout in a loud voice, "Unclean," to warn others, so people could avoid them, so their disease wouldn't be passed on, but also so they wouldn't pass on religious uncleanness. To be a leper was to be religiously outcast as well, which is why the healing is described in verse 14 and 17 as being cleansed. It's why Jesus tells them to go and show themselves to a priest. To be a leper meant a life of constant humiliation and isolation. It was a life of marginalized existence. And there's a haunting phrase in verse 12 that just kind of sums this up. It says this: "As Jesus was going into the village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called in a loud voice." There you have people who have lived forever away from people. And the closest they can get to Jesus is enough to shout at him. But Jesus sees them, verse 14. He sees them. He sees them when nobody else did. A life on the forgotten margins, and yet Jesus sees them. But for gratitude to happen, you also have to see him. That's the power. You must see Jesus, and only one leper did. Now, of course, all of them saw Jesus, but really saw who he was. And when he really saw who Jesus was, it transformed his life to a life of joyful thanksgiving. And here is how. When you see Jesus for what he is, you will find a compelling beauty that will change you forever. What we're seeing here is the very heart of Jesus in action. What the lepers ask for in verse 13, what they cry for, pity, they say, "Have pity on us." It can also be translated mercy or compassion. And it's a word constantly associated with Jesus in the Gospels. Compassion is what flows from his heart. One writer says, as naturally as rays flow from the sun, compassion flows from the heart of Jesus. You're seeing here what the heart of Jesus naturally is and does. Think of this especially in light of what we said about the leper. They were considered unclean. Now there's another detail here. Doubly unclean for the leper who comes back in Thanksgiving. Because this leper was a Samaritan. Luke points that out twice. And Samaritans and Jewish people hated one another. Jewish people believed that Samaritans were racially impure, that they were theologically dangerous, they were lethal. By rights, Jesus should hate him, but here is what we see instead. He has compassion. And instead of moving away from him, he moves towards him. Now perhaps you say, okay, fine. I understand that. I understand why from there somebody might be grateful, but what does that have to do with me? And how does that help me in my battle with gratitude? My life is so different from the life of the leper. Actually, no. We're the same. We're the same. What do I mean? Did you hear the puzzle that the account finishes with? Verse 19. Then Jesus says to the one who has returned, rise and go, your faith has made you well. What does Jesus mean? Has made you well. I mean, Jesus can't mean the physical healing. Why? Because the other 9 had that as well. The other 9 had received that. So Jesus can't mean the physical healing. They were all healed. So what is this? This is a different kind of wellness. See, this is pointing to more than just a cure from leprosy. The made well there literally means has saved you. And Bible scholars will point out that there is, in the Bible, a link, an analogy between the physical condition of leprosy and the spiritual condition of sin. See, just like leprosy in the body isolated people from others, sin in the heart will isolate you from God. Just as leprosy in the body was a spiritual death by inches, a physical death by inches, so sin in the soul is a spiritual death by inches. In fact, it's the only death that can really kill you, which is why faith in Jesus is the only thing that can truly make you well. Because it brings you to trust in the only one with power to heal the outside and the inside as well. See, this was the one leper that got the deepest healing. This was the one leper who leaves with it as well in his soul as it was in his body. Here's what you must see. Jesus is as interested. Full restoration means spiritual and physical. It means both. It always has to mean both. Do you see your need for that today? Do you see the sickness that exists in your soul? You know what's really interesting about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? It works as a morality tale. In fact, nearly all of Roald Dahl's stories do. And right at the end, what happens? Well, Charlie is the last one left standing. Willy Wonka turns to him and he says, Charlie, you get everything. You don't just win the tour, you win the factory. Why? Here's why. Because he's the only kid who thought he didn't deserve it. Charlie's from a poor family. He has nothing. He eats only cabbage soup. He's humble from the beginning. Every other kid walks with a swagger and they get taken out one by one. In the end, though, Charlie gets everything. Here's why. Because he realizes he deserves nothing. That's why. And that's the cure for ingratitude. See, Jesus is described in verse 11 as going to Jerusalem. Do you know what? That's more than geography. Jesus was going to Jerusalem to the cross. That's what it means. And he went to the cross to die for sinful people like us, for sin-sick people like us. The only thing we're entitled to is judgment, but Jesus as the judge, he steps in to save. And as he steps in to save, think about it. Jesus is the ultimate clean one. Jesus was the most morally pure person ever to walk the earth. And the good news of the gospel, though, is that Jesus is contagiously clean. When he touched the leper, what happened? What happened? Did Jesus become unclean? No. It was the leper who became clean. Do you see? Your soul must be touched by the contagious cleanness of Jesus. And when he does, you know what that will do? It will melt you. When you really see him, you erupt with thanksgiving. Your heart overflows with uncontainable gratitude, because from that moment forward, everything feels like gift. Everything feels like a gift. See, if you read the Testament, if you ever have the privilege of speaking to terminal patients who've gone into some kind of remission, who've received some kind of cure, here's what you find. It comes up over and over again: a sense of enormous gratitude. And a phrase that's often used in the descriptions as they describe what life now feels like: every day feels to me like a gift. But what if you see? What if your heart senses? What if you know that Jesus has taken the ultimate sentence? He's removed the only sickness that can lay your soul down forever. And he's bestowed upon you a cleansing and a purity. It means from that moment forward, everything is a gift. Every moment feels like a moment where you can express gratitude. In fact, you never really move from the place of verse 16. Humble thanksgiving at the feet of Jesus. The extent to which you see Jesus will control the extent of your gratitude. That's the power. Here's where I finish. How do we make this the dominant note of our lives? How do we make this our daily reality? Well, this is the practice of gratitude. Just let me say a couple of things. 2 things. First of all, you've got to constantly refocus. You have to refocus. Gratitude is so powerful as a practice because it allows you to reframe your experience. This is true across the board. That's why gratitude practice is recommended by so many mental health experts. Gratitude trains the brain to experience, to notice positive things, and that shifts your attention away from what's lacking towards what is good. And that then creates this powerful feedback loop. The more good you see, the more thankful that you can feel. And the more thankful you are, the more you find that seems to be good in the world. It's reinforcing. In fact, the more you see, the more you see. And the more you do this, the more your heart gets trained to do it. There's a great part in Romeo and Juliet where the friar Lawrence, the monk, he tells Romeo that he's banished, and Romeo responds with high drama. Romeo is very hard work, and he hears the news that he's going to go into exile, and he says, "Banishment, be merciful, friar. Say unto me death, for exile hath more terror in his look, much more than death. Do not say banishment." And Friar Lawrence turns to him, and do you know what? He diagnoses him. Friar Lawrence turns around and he says, "Oh, deadly sin. Oh, rude unthankfulness." And then, here's what's fascinating. He says to Romeo, "Let me tell you all you have to be thankful for." And he lists it, one thing after another. And after each thing, he says to Romeo this: "There art thou happy. There art thou happy." I love that. And you know what? I find that looping through my prayers so often, on almost a daily basis. There art thou happy. Now I realize that probably places me in a niche. I appreciate that. But here's the point. You have to look. And do you know what that sometimes feels like? It feels like the prospector sifting for gold, churning the muck through the sieve until you see something, a tiny nugget, a glint, that you can turn to God in gratitude and say thankful. Thank you. But this is way more specific for those of us who are Christians, because you have to refocus the gaze of your heart upon God. This is more than just a general gratitude thing I'm advocating. Did you notice how focused on God the actions of the grateful man are? He comes back, verse 15, praising God. And Jesus says in verse 18, why haven't the others come to return praise to God? Gratitude focuses on God. You have to keep looking to Jesus. You have to make this personal. It's not just a vaguely thankful feeling. This is gratitude to a person. It is the picture of the leper cleansed, healed, throwing himself on the feet of Jesus. See, anonymous gifts are beautiful. They have their place. But the problem with them is the impulse they create. You want to say thank you, but you don't know what to do with it. And so you kind of just have to live with it. It feels strange. But when it's someone who gives you the gift, when you can look in their eyes and see their smile, when you can throw your arms around them and say thank you for that thing, oh, it adds a different dimension. And that's what happens as you look to Jesus. It is an engine for gratitude like no other. This is as personal as saying, Jesus, I remember what you have done for me. Jesus, thank you. And do you know why? This is what makes Christian gratitude entirely unique. It can exist regardless of circumstances. Even if things in your life right now are incredibly difficult, Christian gratitude is still commanded by the Bible and still possible because it can focus on Jesus, and what he has done for the heart exists alongside the struggles that we still face in the world. It's grounded in Jesus, not circumstances. You've got to refocus. It's got to become personal. And here's the other thing. You need to obey. There's a clue in the passage to a spiritual reality that applies in every situation. And you see it in verse 14. It says this, when he saw them, he said, go, show yourselves to the priest. And as they went, they were cleansed. That's a magnificent detail. But we just kind of read straight over it. When does healing happen? As they went. As they went. In other words, Jesus doesn't say, let me heal you. Now we'll go. He says, go. And as they obey him, as they take him at his word, that's when they see the healing happen. In other words, obedience comes before results. It requires taking Jesus at his word, believing what he says is true. Let me take this and say, listen, if you're thinking about Christianity today, perhaps you're approaching this by saying, I have to have all of my questions answered. I want everything straight. I want everything ironed out before I'm willing to believe. But what if we're being told this works the other way around? Of course, Christianity is reasonable. There are proofs, compelling, overwhelming, absolutely. But sometimes you have to act as if it were true and just see what happens. Like the lepers, you act first. In spite of the doubts, in spite of the fears, the uncertainty, simply take a step into it. Can I say this to you this afternoon? Maybe for the very first time. Why not start today acting as though it was true? Taking Jesus at his word with all of your questions, with all of your doubts, see what happens. See what happens. But what does this have to do with you if you're a Christian and gratitude? Well, Philippians 4, perhaps one of the most famous parts of the Bible on commanding a spirit of thanksgiving, rejoicing. And actually an incredibly powerful passage about worrying and peace. And it says part of it's the Apostle Paul writing, and he says part of the way to avoid worry is with thanksgiving. Listen to Philippians chapter 4. We're told to rejoice. Again, I say always rejoice. Let your gladness, your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Then listen. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. We're told, don't be anxious, which is fine, but what should we be doing instead? Making requests to God with thanksgiving. That's what we should be doing. Thanksgiving is put against as an antidote to anxiety. But if you look carefully, it goes against what we so often think. What we think is the way it goes is you make your requests to God, and then if you get results, then you thank him. And that's what we naturally think, isn't it? If I'd have asked most of you, you would have said, yeah, that's the way it goes. That's not what this says. It says, as you make your request, your thanks comes with it. You thank him as you make the request. You don't wait until you see what he's going to do. Why? Same reason as before. It's the same as the lepers. You take him at his word. Do you know what that's another way of saying? You trust him. You trust him. You acknowledge that life is in his hands, and you thank him. You thank him for whatever he is about to do, because you trust him that he knows better than you. Look, when you start living this way, when you refocus, when you obey, do you know what it brings? It brings a life of joyful humility. Joyful humility. Self-centeredness that leads to pride, relentless sinful self-focus will always make you miserable. But a life of gratitude leads to humility, which gives you the ability to focus on God, which is what you were made for, that brings delight and joy like nothing else. Internal, external, look at the leper, look at his joy. This is now a life of exuberant joy. He cries out so loud in verse 15 because his heart is so full. And that can be true of our hearts as well. Do you see Jesus for this? Do you know him for this? Then let your heart respond in gratitude.